Hello, this is Bruce.
And Jackie from Tourist Trek.
We travel as much of the world as possible and then assemble the things that we learned, both good and bad, into videos so that we can pass that learning experience on to you.
We have had some fantastic trips with itineraries that have worked out extremely well. The photos that you are watching are from just some of our more memorable trips.
I do a lot of research before we depart, so hopefully our channel can save you some time.
Wherever you go, whatever your plans, travel smart and travel safe. Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Bruce.
And we're with Tourist Trek.
Well, Jackie, we find ourselves here again, and this time there was a recent situation, somewhat recent situation that we had that kind of spurred this video, and it's all about the planning. It's so important to make sure you really plan your trips and vacations. Not necessarily every moment that you're going to be, what am I going to do every moment that I'm gone? But there's some really important things. You're spending a lot of money to go places. Let's make sure that it's right. So take the bad one first.
Sure.
So I was so excited about this trip. It was a Viking, they called it the Caribbean and Amazon adventure. And it was supposed to go out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, down to a couple of Caribbean islands, just two of them, then over to French Guiana, and then up the Amazon. And we had been booked for piranha fishing and so excited about it. Well, about a week before the cruise, 9 days actually, prior to the cruise, they sent us an email that said the water level on the Amazon is too low. We're not going to be able to go there. So that's fine. That happens, and you need to be aware of that. And there's been a number of times when we've been on cruises and the water's too rough to make a particular port because maybe tenders, all different kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's political. There's political unrest in the city, and they have to reroute somewhere else. You know, that goes with the territory. In this particular situation, we never even made it to South America. So, I mean, it was pretty significant change. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it was disappointing in the entire ship of people who actually came. So some people chose not to attend, but there weren't a lot of options for not attending. So we went ahead and we already had the vacation time and everything was already planned for us. So we went ahead and went. So I think in the big picture, the staff on board did the best they could to accommodate, and, you know, they had to do some shuffling to find some different things for us to do at the different ports we were going to be at and change up the whole itinerary. So as far as my thoughts on it, it was definitely not my favorite trip.
Yeah. So a couple of things we got lucky. Normally, I don't book flights with the cruise lines. Thankfully, we did in this case. I don't even know why I did, but I did. And so therefore, they were responsible for making all the changes to our flights, because instead of coming out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and ending in Manaus, Brazil, it was round trip to San Juan. So that definitely meant that flights would be changed.
Well, and we had some friends that we met on the ship that actually we found out live very close to us, which was a whole different thing. But they did their own flights, and so they lost out on they couldn't get a refund on those flights, so they had to redo their own flights, and so they lost some money on that, as well as, you know, just the cruise wasn't what they were wanting.
One other thing that we kind of learned is the numbers that we heard were 25% of the people that were booked didn't show. And talking to other passengers, apparently what they do is they get the insurance and then they, doctor, I need to know, I'm really sick, and get their money back that way. I'm really, and I guess we'll take a look at where we were supposed to go and where we ended up going here in just a second. But ultimately, the Viking offered us 30% cruise credit for future travel, and they gave us $1,000 cabin credit that we had to use up. So they tried a little bit. And I think my biggest problem with the whole situation is I thought it was a short-term kind of problem, but we certainly, I about lost my mind when I talked to the crew on board, and they said it had been well over a year since they had traveled up the Amazon at all. And again, the fact that they took out French Guiana, they could have stopped in other ports in Brazil. So after recently I checked, and AI says that it had actually been 5 years. So the trip was from late November 2023 to early December 2023. But AI says that they didn't make that trip since 2019. That is really upsetting if that's the case. They claim it's not. But regardless, there are ways that leads us to the whole thing of what this video is about, of let's spend the time beforehand to make sure that we're covering some things that we can
have some control over.
And prevent.
Yeah.
So right now we're gonna take a break and show you where we were supposed to go and where we ended up.
So here's the itinerary. The one on the left is what was advertised. The center one is what we got a week before we left. And the one on the right is the one that we actually did and were given the day we left. Out of the 9 destinations that we were supposed to go to, we only made 3, and none of them in South America. On a map view, this is the destination we were supposed to go to on red, and in green overlaid is where we actually went to.
Just a reminder, if you're enjoying this video, please like it, add a comment about some of your experiences at this destination, share it with a friend, and definitely subscribe.
So that was quite a different itinerary than what we were
was.
planning on. And we ended up getting a whole bunch of shots for Amazon,
Right.
and kind of packed for that, and then and ended up being in a completely different space.
Yeah.
So some of the things, if we had planned a little bit better, that's my fault, we could have known that there was likely going to be a problem on the Amazon. So I never thought to even check. So, I mean, you can certainly do an easy internet search for that. But one of the things that I've found since is a website called cruisemapper.com. And what it allows you to do is put in any cruise line and ship, and it'll show you where they are on the planet. And not that that would have necessarily helped me, but what it would have happened is if I went into Amazon right now, I would have seen that there's no ships on there. So as of today, literally last few days, I think is Viking's first successful going up the Amazon again, because
So
the
a year
Viking Sea is
later,
there
yeah.
right now. And by the way, we are recording this in early January, mid-January 2025. So you want to go on an Egypt trip? I looked. There's no ships on the Nile right now. So
That tells
one
us,
would presume that you don't want to book that right now.
Right.
Because it wouldn't have been a problem. If I had known that the Amazon was maybe going to have a problem, I'd have booked one of the other trips and come back to that in a few years. It wouldn't have been a problem. But now they've kind of upset me. Anyway, so Cruise Mapper is great for that. So some of the other things that you need to be careful of is, we took a river cruise with Viking and loved it. But we've heard terrible stories about people having to switch ships and getting bussed and not really even being on a ship at all.
Right. Or using a hotel as a or using the ship as a hotel and then having to bust all the different activities that you were supposed to do off the boat.
So what happens in particular, it's Europe that comes to mind right now, but I think any river cruise, you better be careful of this. In Europe, what happens if the water's too low? Ship can't sail. If it's too high, that's a problem too, because now you have the water level and the height of the ship, and it doesn't fit under the bridges.
The bridges, yeah.
Those bridges were not made with that travel in mind.
Right.
So now I use AI for a lot of stuff, for business, for travel, for a lot of things. So use it. Microsoft's Copilot, Google's Gemini are great tools for asking all kinds of different things. But what is the best time to cruise the Danube, for instance, where the water levels will be most stable, et cetera, et cetera. Do that research. Do the research of what's going to be the average temperature in January somewhere. That doesn't always work. We did a trip to Alaska and it was 95 degrees.
Right.
So, also Vancouver and was 25 degrees over average on a recent trip. So you're never guaranteed anything because a storm could come in or whatever and raise water levels. But at least you're greatly increasing your odds of having a smoother trip.
And you can ask very specific questions like, what should I pack for this trip at this time, taking a cruise, these are the ports. And it'll give you a nice packing list too of things that you might not have considered bringing. And they'll give you like those little tips, like making sure you have the right electrical tools or whatever to plug into those sockets over there. And, they'll give you all the tips that you might not have thought to look up.
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe you're prone to seasickness. So we recently completed a trip to Antarctica, which was fantastic, and we'll do a segment on that soon. But one of the fun things about your rite to passage to Antarctica is called the Drake Passage. And that is, their term for it is where two oceans collide, and that's the Atlantic and Pacific at the bottom of South America. At the tip of South America is a city called Ushuaia, and then just below that is the Drake Passage. And when we went through it on the way down, the crew said it was about medium rough, and medium rough for the Drake Passage means 25-foot waves. It was rocking.
It was swaying quite significantly.
So, that is a trip that you probably don't want to go on if you're prone to seasickness. That was the first time you ever got seasick.
Yeah.
And I wore a patch, so, that worked fine for me. You wore it on the way back, and that was fine. Although it was a little calmer on the way back.
It was. I wore it the second night of the Drake Passage because I got sick on the first day. Not as sick as a lot of folks on the ship did, but I put it on. I finally decided, okay, I'm going to use it. And so that second night I was fine as well.
Yeah, there were a lot of people stuck in their room for that crossing. And that's about 36 hours. It's not just a couple hours. But if you do want to go to Antarctica, there are other cruise lines and other itineraries that will fly you to some islands that are much closer to Antarctica and should be much smoother. So, that's just example of something that AI might have told us about. I mean, we found that out pretty quickly. But so that's something to be concerned about. In the Caribbean, you probably need to be at least aware that hurricane season is from June to early November, typically. Seems to be getting a little longer nowadays, but so you're taking a risk. So if you are doing that, be aware you may very well be changing, but it's probably only an island or two or something like that, not a complete itinerary change like we had. But it's also a good reason if you are a little bit more worried about it. I don't always get travel insurance. I have on some recent trips. But if it's a little more risky trip and you know that, make sure you get it. going to Antarctica, you can't even go if you don't have a doctor's
Right,
note that says you're physically able to travel, because you're at the southern end of the world.
With no hospitals right there ready to take care of you.
No nothing.
Yeah, they got to take you on a helicopter and get you somewhere safe.
Yeah, so you got to make sure that you have evacuation insurance. But just having travel insurance in a riskier itinerary would be.
And when you do book travel or purchase travel insurance, you want to consider all the different things that you might want in that. So some insurance will just cover, like, if your trip gets canceled or there's something, and they'll reimburse you for flights or whatever. Other insurance will have the medical pieces in there, right? That if something happens to you, they will helicopter you out and get you into a safe place. And that becomes important depending on where you're going to be. For instance, Antarctica, because you have to be able to get transported somewhere. And you don't want the high cost of what that would be if you didn't have the insurance. So thinking about where you're going to be and the risks involved, whether it's just medical or the potential of a cancellation or a change to the itinerary, like, what do you need to think about when you're purchasing that insurance?
The Antarctica trip taught me something else. Be very leery or beware if the cruise line offers charter flights. That was quite a surprise and completely untold to us, that we were going to have to meet in the lobby at 3 a.m. to make that charter flight. I don't know. I suspect maybe all the cruise lines are somewhat similar to that. I don't know. But that might be something you want to ask, because they didn't tell us. So we were not prepared for that, and not a good situation. But so watch out and make sure you understand about how they handle charter flights. And if you are prone to seasickness, the best place in the ship is lower in the ship and as much in the center, both left and right and forward and back as possible, will be the smoothest ride for you. If it's 25-foot waves, it's going to be rocky everywhere. No matter where,
yeah.
But if you're up on the top, then it just makes it a lot worse. For one thing we have always done is we always get into the departure city 2, 3, 4 days early. Really good idea that we did at this time, going down to Buenos Aires for Antarctica, because there was a 16-hour American Airlines delay.
Which made us lose a full day in Buenos Aires, which disappointing that we lost that day. But if we had made that any closer to the day of, embarkation on the ship, that would have been a really tight and panic-inducing feeling.
Or we would have missed it completely. Because a lot of the times when you miss a cruise, you can fly to the next port and get on.
Yeah.
There are no ports in Antarctica.
So,
fun thing, they also lost all 4 of our checked luggage. But what saved us there was the fact that I put trackers, essentially Apple AirTags, in all the luggage. And I brought it up. I showed them. Nope. They're actually in this airport, in the Ushuaia airport.
Yeah.
So we're not leaving until we get them. So that's a really good plan for you to do. They're not super cheap, but it's worth it.
Cultures as far as where we all come from, but even like age and demographics in that way too, which play a part in, what, again, activities might be available or what kind of entertainment might be available, just kind of how they run your day.
And again, AI is a great place for that. So, if you want a casino, don't go on Viking.
Right.
If you want to party all day, probably, and all night, probably Princess Cruises may not be your best fit for that.
Right.
If you want to get away from kids, you probably don't want to go on Carnival or Disney.
Right.
So there's things along that lines too, for sure. That's a good point, Jackie. Getting back to kind of time of the year, there's a lot of places, like we have it here in Phoenix, we have monsoons. So a lot of places have monsoons. You want to know when their rainy season is and when their hot season is. probably don't want to schedule your trip to
Or
Phoenix
when
in
their natural
August
disaster season is.
at 120
Yeah.
degrees. So there's a few other things I always check whenever we're going to go somewhere. One is the U.S. State Department's travel warnings.
Mhm.
So they have a map that color codes everything of safe to travel, safe but be careful, safe but be extra careful, all the way to do
Don't
not
go
travel.
there. Yeah.
So you definitely want to check that
Yeah.
because surprisingly, our airlines do fly into some of those. So you're not going to see, oh, I can't get there as a situation because that's not
Because you
true.
can get there.
You can get there.
Maybe you want to be there right now.
But so check that out, and also checking with the CDC as to what travel vaccines they recommend for different areas. For U.S. travelers, a lot of it would be probably Asia, South America, that probably have the most.
And it's because some places it's an expectation or requirement to be able to be there. So when we were going to be traveling to the Amazon, we needed to get yellow fever and malaria, and so we had to be prepared for that. So otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to be in. So it's just certain things to know that some countries or places there's a requirement as opposed to just a recommendation. So you want to know kind of what that looks like too.
And then the other thing that you kind of reminded me about is in different countries, they have different visa and passport requirements, right? It's really common for passports. I don't understand why, but your passport needs to expire 6 months after you complete travel in probably most situations, which I find that really odd, but for some
So
reason,
you want
it
to
is what
really
it
pay
is.
attention to the expiration date and make sure that you've got a clearance of 6 months after your return time before you're traveling. Otherwise, you want to get that renewed.
Now, you and I, when we travel to a city, we kind of 3 or 4 nights is often, at least in a major city.
Oh, you're talking outside of cruising. So when we're just going to visit different places and we're going to be on land.
Correct.
Okay.
We usually plan on 3 or 4 days in a particular city before moving on. Some people might like longer or shorter, but it's really hard to know that sometimes. So one of the ways that I do that is I go onto a website called visitacity.com. And I really like that website. I know that there's others like it too, but they publish itineraries. So if you go to Paris, look it up there, they probably have 1 day to, I don't know, 7 days or more type of things. So that gives you an idea of how long should I plan, because not everywhere is the same. We have an upcoming trip to Luxembourg, and I think it was that one. Don't hold me to it, but they pretty much had trouble filling up a day in the itinerary. So that tells me, okay, maybe I don't want to be there for a week.
Right, because there won't be as much to do there.
Right. So, and try to give yourself some jet lag recovery time too. Is always a good idea. Translators. My favorite translator is Google Translate. It's an app on most phones that you can get on most phones. It is free. You can translate from one language to another. You can even have conversations back and forth. We've done it a number of times. I love its ability to translate signs and menus right in it. So you hit the little picture button, basically, you just hold it over a menu, and in real time, it translates everything for you. It's just really phenomenal technology.
Even going to museums, we're able to, so some museums have, multiple languages and you can find your language and read, but we were at a museum, I think it was in Buenos Aires actually, and it was all in Spanish. And even though we are Duolingo professionals here, we're on that all the time, we haven't mastered that language. And so reading historical context, it was helpful using Google Translate to get an idea of what they were trying to convey in the pictures and the artifacts.
And a good search all the time is about the language and how common is it to speak English. Buenos Aires was one of the more challenging cities we've ever been in, as far as that goes. Maybe 50% of the people spoke some English. Their English was way better than my Spanish.
Right. We'll give them that.
But and we do know, a little Spanish, but so that was helpful.
Yeah.
That was helpful. But that was interesting with Buenos Aires because I wasn't really expecting that.
Yeah.
So always a good thing to look
Kind of
forward
know what
to.
the language will look like. Yeah.
Google Translate is really good. It's been my go-to. If you have another one you like, and any comments, please
Let us know. Yeah, we'd love to check out.
Provide comments on the video, and of course like and subscribe too. But one of the things that we did is I thought it was really cool, and I bought this language translator that kind of looks like an iPhone, a little bit smaller. And the problem is it kind of works, but you really need internet access. There's only maybe 5 to 7 languages you can download and use it offline. But still, that just always kind of just seemed, I don't know that it ever worked for me when I needed it.
Yeah, we were struggling with that one quite a bit. We tried to use it, but we found Google Translate was just much easier because it's on your phone, it's an app, and it's free, so why not just use what's already working well?
Now, be careful though. Now, we use T-Mobile for travel, and that means we can go and get data and texting in some silly 160 different countries or so in travel for no extra cost at all if we call with 25 cents a minute. So that becomes important. But if you're on a different carrier and go somewhere, make sure you understand the carrier's rates and rules and so forth. Otherwise, I mean, there's some people that have gotten some really big bills because they didn't check that out prior. But if you don't have data there, then you're not going to want to use Google Translate. Although I think you might be able to download offline some languages.
I think there is an option to download. So if you know in advance what language you're going to be needing to download, then that at least helps that.
And then actually another trip we did a couple of years ago that we've already posted. We wanted to get out of Phoenix in the summer, so we went to ski towns in Colorado and Utah.
Yeah,
but the thing with that, you got to be careful of, is altitude. Because they were all at about 9 to 10,000 feet above elevation. Some people can get elevation sickness for that. So
and dogs.
So you might want to keep that in mind and prepare for that. There is altitude medicine, and you might want to get your pets checked out if they're going with you. Otherwise, I think the other thing that I use, and there's probably a billion things I'm not thinking of right now, but we use amateurtraveler.com quite a bit.
Yeah.
We really that's a podcast, and we really like their sessions because he brings in other people and to talk about it, but he also knows a lot about the areas because he travels so much, and really good perspectives, what to do, what to watch out for, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing you might do is check city crime rates and be aware, particularly with petty theft and pickpocketing. We'll do a segment on pickpocketing soon, and our experiences with that. But you got anything else to add, Jackie?
No, I think just in general, just, like Bruce said, making sure when you're planning a vacation, you're putting a lot of money into it. You're taking time that's, valuable, because if you're working all the time and then you just have so many weeks a year that you can use, you just want to make sure that you're putting as much planning and prep into going on a vacation and making sure that it's the best it can be. And so really, using some of these ideas of, making sure you know the weather, making sure you know what's going to work better for you as far as cruise or on land, checking out to see what kind of a cruise you're going to want to be on. If you're going on a river cruise, know that the river water changes quite a bit. So using Cruise Mapper, checking in with AI to see how that looks, checking out the time of the year, all those things I think are important. And then all the different tools that you gave or making sure that if you're going to be on land, you know kind of how long to stay in a place, all of that. Really good planning 101.
Yeah, with planning, you can't avoid everything, but you can certainly improve your chances of making the most of your
Yeah.
vacation. Anything else?
Well, and then know what items you're going to want to purchase while you're there, so you can also make room in your suitcase. You got to have extra luggage space when you're coming back for all the stuff you want to get while you're there. So that's an important thing to think about too.
That's a good tip. Well, thanks for your time, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Please like the video and add a comment about some of your favorite experiences at this destination. Share it with a friend and definitely subscribe.